The orbital station EOS floated silently in the dark void of space, its metallic surface glinting faintly under the distant light of a dying star. Inside, the air buzzed with quiet energy as cadets moved about their tasks. Among them was Alex Carter, a young man with messy brown hair and a knack for solving problems no one else could see. He wasn't the strongest or the loudest, but his mind worked like a machine, always calculating, always planning. Beside him stood Mia Rodriguez, her sharp eyes scanning the room as she barked orders to the others. She had a commanding presence, even though she was barely out of her teens. They were here for a training exercise, one of the toughest tests they'd face before graduating from Earth's military academy. The goal was simple: simulate building defenses on Orin 7, a barren moon that orbited a gas giant far from Earth. It was supposed to be routine, just another drill to prepare them for real missions in the future. But today, something felt different. The instructors seemed unusually tense, and the cadets couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Alex leaned over a console, tapping furiously at the screen. "This isn't right," he muttered under his breath. "These readings, they're not part of the simulation." Mia glanced over her shoulder. "What do you mean?" "I mean," Alex said, pointing at the data streaming across the display, "there's something out there. Something big, and it's not ours." Before Maya could respond, the lights flickered, and a low hum filled the station. Everyone froze, their eyes darting toward the main viewport. At first, nothing appeared. Then, slowly, a shadow loomed into view. A massive alien ship, sleek and angular, its surface shimmering like liquid metal. More ships followed, forming a fleet that dwarfed the tiny station. Gasps rippled through the room as the cadets realized what was happening. A crackling sound echoed through the speakers, and a holographic figure materialized in the center of the room. It was tall, with elongated limbs and glowing eyes that seemed to pierce through everyone present. Its voice was cold and emotionless, each word dripping with disdain. "You are humans," it began. "Inhabitants of a primitive world. We are the Kryn. Your kind has nothing we desire, yet your interference threatens our plans." Mia stepped forward, her heart pounding but her voice steady. "Who are you? What do you want?" The alien tilted its head, studying her with obvious curiosity. "We seek control of this system. Surrender now, and we may spare your lives. Resist, and you will perish." The room fell silent. Some of the cadets exchanged nervous glances, while others clenched their fists, ready to fight. Alex's mind raced. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and completely unprepared for an actual battle. But surrender, that wasn't an option either. "We don't negotiate with bullies," Alex said firmly, stepping up beside Mia. His words broke the tension, earning murmurs of agreement from the group. The alien's expression didn't change, but there was a flicker of something in its glowing eyes. Surprise, maybe, or amusement. "Very well," it said after a pause. "You have 1 hour. Use it wisely." With that, a hologram vanished, leaving the cadets alone with their thoughts. The clock started ticking, and the weight of the situation settled heavily on their shoulders. This wasn't a drill anymore. It was real. And if they didn't act fast, none of them would make it out alive. The cadets stood frozen for a moment, the alien's words still hanging in the air like a storm cloud. 1 hour. That was all they had to prepare for an attack from a species far more advanced than anything they'd ever encountered. Panic began to creep into the edges of their minds, but Mia Rodriguez refused to let it take hold. She took a deep breath, her voice cutting through the silence like a blade. "Listen up," she shouted, her tone sharp enough to grab everyone's attention. "We don't have time to waste. If we're going down fighting. But we're not going down. Not today. Alex, what do we know about those ships?" Alex Carter was already hunched over a console, his fingers flying across the keyboard. His eyes scanned the data streaming in from the station's sensors. "They're big," he said quickly, "and their weapons are way beyond anything we've got. But He paused, squinting at the screen. Their shields. It looks like they're vulnerable to high-frequency pulses. If we can disrupt their systems, even for a second, it might give us a chance. Mia nodded, her mind racing. Okay, here's the plan. We need to build something that can generate a shield around Orin 7. Something strong enough to hold off their attacks while we figure out our next move. Alex, you're in charge of engineering. Take whoever you need and start building. What about me? Asked Emily Dawson, a petite redhead with a knack for communications. Her voice trembled slightly, but her hands were steady as she adjusted her headset. You're on intel, Maya replied without hesitation. I want you to tap into their comms if you can. Find out what they're planning. If we know what they're going to do before they do it, we might be able to stay one step ahead. Emily nodded, her fingers already dancing across her console. Got it. Jake Thompson, a burly mechanic with grease stains on his uniform, stepped forward. What about me? I'm not much of a strategist. Mia gave him a quick smile. You're with Alex. If anyone can turn scrap metal into a weapon, it's you. As the group split up, the station buzzed with renewed energy. Alex led his team to the storage bay, where shelves were lined with spare parts and outdated equipment. It wasn't much, but it would have to do. He grabbed a welding torch and started sketching out a rough design for the shield generator. We'll need conduits, he said, pointing to a pile of old mining tools. And power cells, lots of them. Jake cracked his knuckles. Leave it to me. I'll make it work. Meanwhile, Emily sat in the communications room, her brow furrowed in concentration. The Kryn's signals were encrypted, but she was determined to break through. After several tense minutes, she managed to intercept fragments of their transmissions. They weren't just planning an attack. They were watching the cadets, studying their every move. Emily's stomach churned, but she forced herself to focus. She rerouted the station's signal to create false readings, making it look like reinforcements were on the way. It wasn't much, but it might buy them some time. Back in the main control room, Mia paced back and forth, keeping an eye on the clock. 45 minutes left. She knew they were running out of time, but she also knew they couldn't afford to rush. Every decision mattered. Every second counted. As the cadets worked, the weight of the situation pressed down on them. None of them had faced anything like this before. They were just trainees, kids barely out of school. But somewhere along the way, they realized something. They weren't alone. They had each other. And together, they might just stand a chance. Outside, the Kryn fleet loomed closer, their massive ships casting long shadows over the barren surface of Orin 7. Commander Vrax watched silently, his glowing eyes narrowing as he observed the humans scrambling to defend themselves. He expected chaos, confusion, surrender. What he saw instead was something entirely unexpected. Determination, unity, hope. For the first time in centuries, Vrax felt a flicker of doubt. The clock ticked down relentlessly, each second feeling like an eternity. In the storage bay, Alex Carter and his team worked feverishly to assemble the shield generator. The room was a mess of wires, metal scraps, and half-finished components, but Alex's mind was sharp, piecing everything together like a puzzle. He knelt on the floor, welding two conduits together, while Jake Thompson rummaged through a pile of discarded mining equipment. Got it, Jake exclaimed, holding up a battered power cell. This should do the trick. Alex glanced at it, wiping sweat from his forehead. Perfect. Hook it up to the mainframe, but be careful, it's old. If it overheats, we're done for. Jake nodded and got to work, his hands moving with surprising precision. Despite his gruff exterior, he had a gift for fixing things, even under pressure. Nearby, another cadet named Ryan helped by sorting through spare parts, handing tools to Alex whenever he needed them. The air was thick with tension, but also with a strange kind of hope. They were doing the impossible, and they all knew it. In the communications room, Emily Dawson sat hunched over her console, her fingers flying across the keyboard. She had managed to create a loop in the station's signal, feeding false data to the Kryn fleet. To them, it looked like reinforcements were already on their way, a bluff designed to make them hesitate. But Emily wasn't stopping there. She was trying to tap into their surveillance systems, hoping to get a clearer picture of what they were up against. "This isn't working," she muttered to herself, frustration creeping into her voice. Then suddenly, the screen flickered, and a flood of alien symbols appeared. It was gibberish to her, but she recognized patterns, repeating sequences that might hold clues about their next move. Her heart raced as she started decoding the information, piece by piece. Back in the control room, Mia Rodriguez kept everyone connected, relaying updates and coordinating efforts. She moved from station to station, checking progress and offering encouragement. When someone stumbled, she was there to pick them up. When someone doubted, she reminded them why they were fighting. "How's the shield coming?" she asked Alex over the comms. "It's almost ready," Alex replied, his voice tight with focus. "We just need to stabilize the power flow. If we can do that, it should hold long enough to buy us some time." "Good," Maya said. "Emily, what about you?" "I've got eyes on them," Emily answered, her voice trembling with excitement. "They're moving into position, but I think my fake signals are working. They're slowing down." Mia allowed herself a small smile. "Keep it up. We're counting on you." As the minutes slipped away, the cadets pushed themselves harder than ever before. Alex and Jake tested the shield generator one last time, making sure every connection was secure. Ryan double-checked the conduits, tightening bolts and adjusting wires. In the corner of the storage bay, another cadet named Lily used a portable scanner to monitor energy levels, ensuring the system wouldn't overload. Outside, the Kryn fleet hovered ominously, their ships casting eerie shadows over Orin 7. Commander Vrax watched silently, his glowing eyes narrowing as he observed the humans' frantic activity. He had expected panic, disarray, perhaps even surrender. Instead, he saw determination, teamwork, ingenuity. It was unsettling, to say the least. "They are building something," one of his officers reported, pointing to the readings on their sensors. "Some kind of defensive structure." Vrax leaned forward, studying the data. "Primitive technology," he said dismissively. "It will not withstand our weapons." But deep down, a seed of doubt began to grow. These humans were not behaving like prey. They were acting like hunters, using whatever they had to fight back. For the first time, Vrax wondered if attacking them was worth the risk. Inside the station, the cadets finished their preparations with only minutes to spare. Alex activated the shield generator, and a faint hum filled the air as a shimmering barrier enveloped Orin 7. It wasn't perfect, but it was strong enough to give them a fighting chance. "We did it," Alex said, exhaling sharply. "Now let's see if it holds." Mia stepped forward, her voice firm and steady. "Everyone, take your positions. This isn't over yet." And with that, the final countdown began. The hum of the shield generator grew louder as the cadets braced themselves for the inevitable. Outside, the Kryn fleet moved into position, their ships gliding silently through the void like predators circling their prey. The tension aboard the station was palpable, but there was no time for fear. Every cadet had a job to do, and they focused on it with everything they had. Alex Carter stood near the main console, his eyes glued to the readings from the shield generator. The barrier surrounding Orin 7 shimmered faintly, its surface rippling like water under a breeze. It wasn't perfect, far from it, but it was holding steady for now. Beside him, Jake Thompson kept one hand on the power cell, ready to make adjustments if anything went wrong. "They're coming," Emily Dawson's voice crackled over the comms. She was still in the communications room, her fingers flying across the keyboard as she monitored the Kryn's movements. "I'm picking up energy spikes. They're charging their weapons." Mia Rodriguez took a deep breath, her voice cutting through the tension. "Stay sharp, everyone. This is it. Seconds later, a first wave of attacks hit. Bright beams of energy lashed out from the Kryn ships, striking the shield with deafening booms. The entire station shook, throwing some of the cadets off balance. Alarms blared and warning lights flashed, but the shield held firm. For now, energy levels are dropping. Lily shouted from her station, her voice tinged with panic. She was monitoring the shield's stability, her hands trembling as she adjusted the controls. We can't take another hit like that. Alex sprang into action, his mind racing. Jake, reroute auxiliary power to the conduits. Ryan, help me reinforce the connections. We need to stabilize this thing. The two men worked quickly, their movements precise despite the chaos around them. Sparks flew as Alex tightened bolts and adjusted wires, while Jake struggled to balance the power flow. The hum of the generator grew louder, almost unbearable, but the shield stabilized just in time for the second wave of attacks. This time, the automated turrets came online. Jake had modified abandoned drones earlier, equipping them with makeshift weapon systems. Now, those turrets fired back at the Kryn ships, their shots small but surprisingly accurate. One by one, the alien vessels were forced to retreat temporarily, giving the cadets a brief reprieve. Commander Vrax watched the battle unfold from his flagship, his glowing eyes narrowing in disbelief. These humans, these primitive creatures, were not only defending themselves but fighting back. His officers exchanged uneasy glances, their confidence wavering. They are adapting, one of them said cautiously. Their technology, it should not be capable of this. Vrax didn't respond. He leaned forward, studying the data streaming across his screen. The shield was crude, yes, but effective. And the counterattacks, though weak, were coordinated and strategic. These humans were resourceful, far more so than he had anticipated. Back on the station, the cadets fought to keep their defenses intact. Emily continued feeding false signals to the Kryn, making them believe reinforcements were closing in. Her hands trembled as she typed, but her focus never wavered. In the control room, Mia paced back and forth, shouting orders and keeping everyone calm. "We've got this," she yelled, her voice filled with determination. "Hold the line." Another salvo of energy beams struck the shield, shaking the station violently. Alarms screamed, and sparks rained down from damaged panels. But the cadets didn't falter. They patched up breaches, redistributed power, and kept the shield alive. Each moment felt like an eternity, but they refused to give up. As the third wave of attacks began, Alex noticed something alarming. The power cell was overheating, its casing glowing red-hot. If it blew, the entire system would fail. Without hesitation, he grabbed a fire extinguisher and sprayed it down, buying precious seconds. Jake rushed over, replacing the overheating cell with a spare they had scavenged earlier. "You okay?" Jake asked, his voice strained. Alex nodded, wiping sweat from his brow. "Yeah, just don't let me die before we win this." The shield flared brightly as it absorbed another barrage of energy blasts, holding strong against the assault. The Kryn ships pulled back once more, regrouping for another attack. For now, the cadets had survived, but they all knew the battle was far from over. In the quiet moments between attacks, Maya looked around at her team. They were exhausted, battered, and covered in grease and soot, but they hadn't given up. Not once. And as she watched them work together, she realized something. These weren't just cadets anymore. They were survivors, fighters, heroes. Outside, Commander Vrax sat in silence, his expression unreadable. These humans were proving to be far more dangerous than he had imagined, and for the first time in centuries, doubt crept into his mind. The battle raged on, the Kryn fleet unleashing wave after wave of attacks against the shield protecting Orin 7. Each strike sent tremors through the station, shaking loose bolts and panels, but the cadets refused to buckle. They worked tirelessly, patching up breaches, rerouting power, and keeping their defenses alive. It was a fight for survival, and every second counted. Commander Vrax watched from his flagship, his glowing eyes narrowing as he observed the humans' relentless efforts. He had expected their makeshift defenses to crumble within minutes, yet here they were, still standing, still fighting. His officers whispered among themselves, their voices tinged with unease. "They should have fallen by now," one of them said cautiously. "Their technology is primitive. How are they holding out?" Vrax didn't answer. Instead, he activated a hidden surveillance drone, sending it closer to the station to gather more information. What he saw astonished him. The humans were not just relying on machines. They were working together, moving with precision and purpose. One young man with messy brown hair, Alex, was constantly adjusting the shield generator, his hand steady despite the chaos around him. A girl with sharp features, Mia, moved between stations, shouting orders and encouraging her teammates. Even the communications specialist, Emily, sat hunched over her console, her fingers flying across the keyboard as she fed false signals to confuse the Kryn fleet. For the first time in centuries, Vrax felt something unfamiliar: respect. These humans were proving to be far more resourceful than he had anticipated. Their unity, their adaptability, it was something the Kryn had never encountered before. Back on the station, the cadets fought to keep their defenses intact. Alex and Jake worked side by side, reinforcing the shield generator while Ryan and Lily monitored energy levels. Sparks flew as they tightened connections and replaced overheating components. The hum of the generator grew louder, almost unbearable, but it held firm against the Kryn's relentless assault. "They're regrouping," Emily shouted over the comms. Her voice was strained but clear. "I think they're planning another attack." Mia clenched her fists, her mind racing. "We can't take much more of this. We need to buy ourselves some time." Alex glanced at the readings on the console. "If we overload the turrets, we might be able to force them back again, but it'll drain what little power we have left." "Do it," Maya said without hesitation. "We'll figure out the rest later." Alex nodded and relayed the order to Jake, who quickly adjusted the settings on the automated turrets. Moments later, the drones unleashed a barrage of counterattacks, forcing the Kryn ships to retreat once more. The station fell silent, save for the faint hum of the generator and the sound of labored breathing. As the cadets caught their breath, Maya looked around at her team. They were battered and exhausted, their uniforms torn and covered in soot, but they hadn't given up. Not once. And as she watched them work together, she realized something. These weren't just cadets anymore. They were survivors, fighters, heroes. Outside, Commander Vrax sat in silence, his expression unreadable. These humans were proving to be far more dangerous than he had imagined. Attacking them further would be costly and potentially futile. Slowly, an idea began to form in his mind. Perhaps there was another way. Back on the station, Alex noticed something alarming. The power levels were dangerously low, and the shield was flickering. If they didn't stabilize it soon, it would collapse entirely. "We need more power," he shouted, his voice filled with urgency. Lily sprang into action, rerouting auxiliary systems to support the shield. Sparks flew as she worked, her hands trembling but determined. Beside her, Ryan adjusted the conduits, ensuring the flow remained steady. The shield stabilized just as the Kryn launched another attack, its surface rippling under the force of the impact. "We've got this," Mia yelled, her voice filled with determination. "Hold the line." And somehow, against all odds, they did. The shield held firm, deflecting the Kryn's weapons and buying the cadets precious time. But as the battle dragged on, Vrax began to realize something. Humanity was not a species to be underestimated, and perhaps engaging them further would be a mistake. In the quiet moments between attacks, Vrax made a decision, one that would change everything for both the Kryn and the humans of Earth. The battle outside the station had reached a fever pitch. The Kryn fleet, frustrated by their inability to break through the humans' defenses, launched another devastating wave of attacks. The shield shimmered violently, its surface crackling with energy as it absorbed the blows. Inside the station, alarms screamed, and the cadets worked frantically to keep everything running. Alex Carter was crouched near the generator, his hands blackened with grease as he adjusted wires and rerouted power. Beside him, Jake Thompson held a fire extinguisher at the ready, prepared to douse any overheating components. "We're losing power," Lily shouted from her station, her voice trembling. "If we don't stabilize this, the shield will collapse." Mia Rodriguez stepped forward, her sharp eyes scanning the room. "Alex, do whatever it takes to keep that shield up. Jake, help him. Ryan, monitor the turrets. Make sure they're ready for the next attack." The team nodded, their movements quick and precise despite their exhaustion. Alex tightened a bolt on the generator, his mind racing. He knew they were running out of time. The Kryn weren't giving up, and neither could they. With one final adjustment, the shield stabilized, holding firm against the onslaught. But everyone in the room could feel it. The system was on the verge of failure. Outside, Commander Vrax watched the chaos unfold. His glowing eyes narrowed as he studied the humans' every move. These Deathworlders, as his people called them, were proving to be far more resilient than he had ever imagined. Their technology was crude, yes, but their teamwork, their determination, it was something extraordinary. For the first time in centuries, Vrax felt doubt creeping into his mind. "They are resisting," one of his officers said cautiously. "Their defenses are weaker now. Another assault should break them." Vrax hesitated. He glanced at the surveillance feed again, watching as Alex and his team scrambled to keep the shield alive. He saw how they supported each other, how they adapted to every challenge thrown their way. These humans were not just fighting for survival, they were fighting with purpose, and that made them dangerous. "No," Vrax said finally, his voice calm but firm. "We have seen enough." His officers exchanged confused glances. "Commander, do you mean to withdraw?" Vrax turned to face them, his expression unreadable. "These humans are not primitives. They are resourceful, adaptable, and united. To continue this assault would only result in unnecessary losses for both sides." The officers fell silent, unsure how to respond. It was unheard of for the Kryn to abandon a mission, especially when victory seemed within reach. But Vrax's decision was final. He gave the order, and the massive alien ships began to pull back, retreating into the void of space. Back on the station, the cadets noticed the sudden silence. The shaking stopped, the alarms quieted, and the hum of the shield generator grew steady. For a moment, no one spoke. They stared at each other, their faces pale with exhaustion, but lit with disbelief. Did we win?" Emily Dawson asked softly, her voice barely above a whisper. Mia let out a shaky laugh, running a hand through her sweat-soaked hair. "I think we did." Alex sank onto the floor, his legs giving out beneath him. "I can't believe it. We actually held them off." Jake grinned, though his face was streaked with dirt and soot. "Told you we'd make it." As the reality of what they had accomplished sank in, the cadets erupted into cheers. They hugged each other, laughed, and even cried, overwhelmed by the enormity of their victory. Against all odds, they had faced an alien threat and survived. Later, as the adrenaline began to fade, Maya stood by the viewport, staring out at the empty expanse where the Kryn fleet had been moments before. She didn't know why the aliens had retreated, but she didn't care. All that mattered was that her team had made it through. Unbeknownst to them, far away aboard the Kryn flagship, Commander Vrax sat in silence, reflecting on what he had witnessed. These humans were unlike any species the Kryn had encountered before. They were fighters, innovators, survivors. Engaging them further would be costly and perhaps pointless. As the fleet disappeared into the stars, Vrax made a mental note. Earth was not a world to be trifled with. Humanity was not to be underestimated. And so, the Kryn abandoned their schemes, leaving the cadets of Eos to celebrate their hard-won victory, a victory that would echo far beyond Orin 7. Weeks passed after the battle on Orin 7, and life aboard the orbital station, Eos, slowly returned to normal, or as close to normal as it could be after what had happened. The cadets, once just trainees preparing for a future they weren't sure they were ready for, now carried themselves with a quiet confidence. They had faced an alien threat head-on and survived. It wasn't something they would ever forget. Alex Carter sat in the engineering bay, tinkering with a small device he'd been working on since the battle. His hands moved methodically, tightening screws and adjusting wires. He wasn't building anything important, just something to keep his mind busy. But every so often, he'd pause and glance at the scared surface of the shield generator nearby. It was a reminder of how close they had come to failure, and how far they had come together. Mia Rodriguez stood by the viewport, staring out at the endless expanse of space. She still thought about the Kryn sometimes, wondering why they had retreated. Had the cadets' defenses really been enough to scare them off? Or had there been something else? She didn't have answers, but she didn't need them. What mattered was that her team had held their ground when it counted. Emily Dawson sat in the communications room, her fingers resting lightly on the keyboard. She hadn't told anyone, but she still replayed the intercepted transmissions from the Kryn fleet in her mind. The aliens' cold voices, their tactical precision. It all felt like a dream now. A strange, terrifying dream. But she also remembered the moment she realized she could outsmart them, feeding false signals and buying her team precious time. For the first time in her life, she felt truly capable. Jake Thompson leaned against a wall in the storage bay, absently polishing a wrench. He wasn't one for big speeches or deep thoughts, but even he couldn't deny that something had changed inside him. Back on Earth, he'd always been the guy who fixed things quietly, staying out of the spotlight. But here, millions of miles away from home, he had become someone else entirely. A fighter, a protector, a hero. The story of what happened on Orin 7 spread quickly among the academy instructors and senior officers. At first, no one believed it. How could a group of cadets hold off an advanced alien fleet? But the evidence was undeniable. The damaged station, the logs of intercepted signals, the makeshift shield generator still humming faintly in the corner. Word eventually reached Earth, though most of the details remained classified. Still, rumors began to circulate about the Deathworlders who had stared down the Kryn and won. Far away, aboard the Kryn flagship, Commander Vrax continued to reflect on what he had seen. He had spent centuries studying weaker civilizations, exploiting their resources, and moving on without a second thought. But humanity was different. These humans didn't back down. They didn't surrender. They adapted, fought, and thrived in the face of overwhelming odds. For the first time, Vrax questioned whether the Kryn's methods were as infallible as he had always believed. "They are dangerous," Vrax said aloud one day, speaking to no one in particular. Not because of their weapons or technology, but because of their spirit. His officers nodded silently, none daring to argue. The decision to abandon the attack on Orin 7 had already sparked whispers among the crew. Some saw it as weakness, others as wisdom. But Vrax didn't care. He knew what he had witnessed, and he knew better than to underestimate humanity again. Back on Eos, the cadets prepared to return to Earth. Their training was complete, and soon they would take their places among the stars, defending their world and exploring new frontiers. As they gathered in the main control room for one last meeting, Maya looked around at her team. "We did something incredible," she said softly, her voice filled with pride. "But this isn't the end. It's just the beginning." The others nodded, their faces lighting up with determination. They had proven themselves against impossible odds, and they knew they could do it again, together. As the station drifted through the silence of space, the memory of the Kryn fleet lingered like a shadow. But it wasn't a shadow of fear. It was a reminder. Humanity was not alone in the universe, but it was also not powerless. And if the Kryn, or anyone else, ever returned, they would find a species ready to fight for its place among the stars. For Alex, Mia, Emily, Jake, and the rest of the cadets, the future was uncertain, but one thing was clear. They were ready for whatever came next.